Alright, TC5881, Chapter 5, Rules and Instructions for the Proper Train Handling. Before reading the following section, cover the recommendation that for the operating of freight train for the essential for the ununderstand limitation for the instruction. Remember, if the instruction is not meant to be the same and the only method which for the train is to be operated, the train is a very complex situation, a system of the machinery that can be reacted in many different ways in the given situation. Any of the reactions depending on the manufacturers, including the arrangement carved within the train makeup, the length of the train, the curvature of the track, the grades, the weather conditions, whether or not the car is loaded or empty, the speed of the train, the characters of the locomotive, the consists, the safe, the save, the one reason or another. No two trains are the same. While the rules are adhered to, the instructions must be adjusted to fit each situation, consistent with the good train handling instructions. Start training. The method used to start the train requires the engineer to take into consideration more important factors such as the throttle response characteristic of the locomotive, the mental condition of the slack in the train stretch and bunch, rail condition, tractive effort of the locomotive consists train length, and terrain. Level track. After the brakes have been released on an entire train, the release of the independent brake valve, move the throttle into run 1. If the train does not start, move the throttle to run 2, higher but not above the run, until run 4 until the train is moving. After the train is moving, when the amperage begins to decrease, the throttle may be moved to the next higher position. If the throttle position 1 starts at the head of it and if it too rapidly, then the independent brake valve may be used to control the surge in the throttle of the position 1. If the train does not move in run 4, remove the throttle to idle and determine the cause of the train not moving. Alright, picture 5-1 shows the direction of the train traveling on the level. MP1, MP2, MP3, MP4. Ascending grade, figure 5-2. Advance the throttle to run and reduce the independent brake valve. Replace the automatic brake valve in the release position. Advance the throttle to run 2. The higher the attempting to start the train, moving as the brakes release toward the rear of the train. It's important to keep the slack stretched, where therefore the heavier the train requires the higher throttle the position before reducing the independent brake valve steps in one. To prevent the locomotive from rolling back into the train, do not allow the throttle to remain in open position any longer than necessary. Attempting to start the train will cause stall burns and traction motor. If the train does not start in run 5, then apply the independent brake valve, reduce the throttle to idle, and apply the automatic brakes as necessary to hold the train on the grade and determine the reason for the train not starting. Consideration must be given to doubling, getting the help for the taking of the slack, preventing possible train separating due to the high tractive effort developed by the locomotive when starting. Caution: use short brakes. The release times taking slack lead easily result in breaking in two because the brakes will be released on the entire train and the rear portion will begin rolling backward before the entire train started. Taking slack is not recommended method of a heavy tonnage or a heavy grade starting. Our figure 5-2 shows the descending of the travel on a ascending grade. MP1 motor power 2, motor power 3, metal power 4, 0.5%. Alright, descending grade with an independent descending grade. See figure 5-3 with an independent brake valve. Let's see figure 5-3. This direction of the traveling around the descending grade 0.53 MP1, MP2, MP3, MP4. With the independent brake valve applied with the automatic brake valve in the release position, reduce the independent brake only to the point that it will allow the train to gradually begin moving. Once the entire train is moving, the independent brake must be gradually reduced to avoid run out of slack. Note that the dynamic brake may be used at any point. At any point, independent brake is reduced if the dynamic becomes effective. Backup movement level or ascending grade. See figure 5-4. Direction of traveling in a backup movement of the level or ascending grade. MP1, MP2, MP3, MP4, 0.5%. Place the automatic brake valve in the release position to allow the sufficient time for the train to release and slack adjust before applying the power. Apply only enough power to start the locomotive and train moving and reduce the independent brake valve. Observe the load meter. Unusual changes in amperage indicate possible train buckling. Consideration must be given to the high buffet force of the concentrated to the head end of the train, resulting in train jackknifing. Alright, that's in your direction of the train travel. Back up the movement of the level ascending grade track. Back up movement descending grade. See figure 5-5. Directing train from the back up the movement of the descending grade 0.5% of the motor power 1, motor power 2, motor power 3, motor power 4. Place the automatic brake valve in the release position to allow the sufficient time to train the brakes to release and slack. Just gradually reduce the independent brake to allow the train to start moving. If the train will not roll on its own, use only enough power to start the locomotive moving. If unable to move, use the dynamic brake and maintain slack stretch condition. Control train speed. Maintain a slack stretch condition. Stop trains. Rule 5.2, stopping trains. The method used to stop a train requires the engineer to take into consideration most important factors such as throttle response characteristics of locomotive, type of the dynamic brake, the weight and length of the load to empty, the distribution of the train, block signal spacing, tons per operative brake, amount of slack in the train, weather of the rails and condition, knowledge of the territory, choosing the train handling method which minimizes the train force and slack action. Slack bunch method of dynamic brake available. The preferred method for level light, heavy, and mountain descending grades. See Figure 5.6. If in power, gradually reduce the throttle to idle power. Pause 10 seconds to activate the dynamic brake. Gradually bunch the slack and increase the desired braking level. A sufficient distance from the stop to make a minimum brake pipe reduction. Actuate if needed with further split reductions. Actuate below 10 miles an hour, supplementing the fading dynamic brake with an independent brake. Approximately 200 feet from the stop of the main final brake pipe, a reduction within brake pipe air exhaust on the stop, keeping the slack bunch within the independent brake. Alright, 5.6 shows the direction of the train travel and the slack bunch method of dynamic braking available. MP power 1, motor power 2, motor power 3, motor power 4 in the direction of the downhill descent. Alright, slack bunch method, dynamic brake not available. Preferred level, the method of level light, heavy, mountain, descending grade. Gradually reduce the throttle idle to allow the slack to adjust at a sufficient distance from the stop, making the minimum brake reduction. If needed, make a further split reduction actuate approximately 200 feet from the stop. Make a final brake reduction with the air pipe exhausting on the stop and allow the locomotive brakes to apply. 5.7 show the direction of travel of the slacking bunch method, the dynamic braking movement direction downhill. Motor power 1, 0.5%, motor 2, motor 3. Alright, C, method of slack bunch method below the 15 miles an hour. Preferred method level light, heavy, and mountain is descending grade. See Figure 5.8. Gradually reduce throttle with idle. Allow the slack to adjust further. Bunch slack with the independent brake at a sufficient distance from the stop. Make a minimum pipe reduction. Deep the slack bunch with the locomotive brake. Approximately 200 feet from the stop. Makes a minimum brake pipe reduction. Keep the slack bunch with the locomotive brake. Note that dynamic brake may be used only if available to bunch the slack, but must be supplemented below 10 miles an hour with locomotive brake. This shows Figure 8 with the direction of the train with the modified slack bunch method going downhill. Motor power 1, 0.5%, motor power 2, motor power 3, 0.5%, motor power 4. Alright, D, throttle reduction method, the preferred method of light and heavy, the mountain ascending grade, Figure 5.9. Gradually reduce the throttle 1 notch at a time, maintaining the slack stretch, allowing the grade to slow the train. After the grade stalls the train with place the independent brake valve in the full application position, allow the independent brake application to become effective, but before reducing the throttle to the idle to prevent the locomotive from roll back into the train. The automatic brakes may be required to hold the train in grade, therefore brake application must be made in advance to solve the preventing rollback after stop. Our direction of the train and a method of throttle reduction. Upwards, motor power 1.13%, motor power 2, motor power 3, 1.13%, motor power 4. Alright, so back up ascending grade bunch, see Figure 5.10. Only in enough maintaining the slack bunch condition, a sufficient distance from the stop, make the minimum brake pipe reduction actuate. If need, make further split reduction and actuate. Avoid high buffering forces, frequently observing the amperage reducing throttle is necessary. If the train comes to a stop, apply the independent brake valve fully. Allow sufficient time for the brakes to become effective to prevent the locomotive from running out and the move of the throttle to idle. Or the direction of the travel and back up moving ascending grade. Moving the direction backing up from motor power 1, motor power 0.5%, motor power 2, motor power 3, 0.5%, motor power 4. Alright, backup movement level descending grade stretch. See Figure 5.11. Gradually reduce throttle idle. Allow the slack to just pause 10 seconds to activate the dynamic brakes to stretch the slack at a sufficient distance, making the brake pipe reduction and actuate. If needed, make further split reduction and actuate. Below 10 miles an hour, supplement the fading dynamic brake and the independent brake until the train stops. If the dynamic brake is unavailable and ineffective, the independent brake may be used to maintain a slack stretch condition. Direction of the train level to back up the movement of the descending grade. Going backwards down a descending grade, motor power 1, 0.5%, motor power 2, motor power 3, 0.5%, motor power 4. Alright, Rule 5.3. Slowing or controlling speed. The method used to slow the controlling train speed required for the engineer to take into consideration more important factors such as load response characteristic, locomotive type of the dynamic brake, weight and load, empty distribution train, block signal spacing, ton per operative brake, the amount of slack in train, weather, rail condition, knowledge of the territory, choosing the train and method which minimizes the train forces / action. Select bunch method dynamic brake available. The preferred method light and heavy mounting descending grade. Power gradually reduce throttle idle. Pause 10 seconds to activate the dynamic brake. Gradually bunch the slack and increase the desired level of retardation. At sufficient distance from the restriction of the minimum brake pipe reduction actuate. If you need to make a further split reduction actuate, when you speed control, they achieve the brake valve handle, move the release position, maintain the sufficient dynamic brake, and keep the slack bunch till the brakes release throughout the train. Note, if the dynamic brake alone will provide sufficient retardation to slow and control the speed, use the train brake is unnecessary. This shows the direction of the travel downhill slack bunch of the dynamic brake available. Motor power 1, motor power 2, 0.5%, motor power 3, 0.5%, motor power 4. Alright, slack bunch method dynamic braking not available. The preferred method level light and heavy. The mounted descending grades. See figure 513. Gradually reduce the throttle idle to allow the slack to adjust at the sufficient distance from the restriction of the main brake pipe reduction and actuate. If you need to make a further split reduction actuate when the speed control has been achieved, the brake valve handle, move the release position, keep the locomotive brake released unless required to avoid severe slack and change. Keep the locomotive brakes released until the need to avoid the slack change of the brake release. Alright, going downhill, the direction of the train is slack and bunch method. The dynamic brake not available. Motor power 1, motor 0.5%, motor power 2, motor power 3, 0.5%, motor power 4. Alright, throttle reduction method, preferred method of light and heavy. The mountain ascending grades. See figure 514. Gradually reduce the throttle 1 notch at a time, maintaining slack stretch condition, allowing the grade to slow the train. Direction travel upwards. 1.13%, motor 1, power 1, motor power 2, motor power 2 to 3, motor power 3 to 4, 1.13%. Throttle modulation method, slack preferred method of controlling speed. See figure 515. Reduce the throttle approaching slack to reduce the train speed. It is necessary to reduce the throttle as head of the position for the being is descending. Just before the head of the portion of the train reaches the ascending grade, increase the throttle. Continue to increase the throttle until the reach of the rear of the portion of the train approaches the ascending grade. Reduce the throttle. The rear portion of the train reaches the ascending grade. Direction of travel. This shows the direction of the train traveled through a modulation method /sag. Motor power 1, 0.5%, negative 0.5%, motor power 3, motor power 0.5%, motor power 4. Select stretch method, the preferred method, the slowing train with a concentration empty car at the rear. Adjust the throttle using enough power to maintain slack stretch condition at sufficient distance for the restriction maximum brake pipe reduction actuated. Reduce the throttle and maintain a slack stretch condition if needed to make a further split reduction actuated. When speed control has been achieved, the automatic brake valve handle may move the release position, reduce the throttle to the lower position until the brake valve has released throughout the train. 516, the direction of the train and the train travel in the slack stretch. Motor power 1, 1.13%, motor power 2, motor power 3, 1.13%, motor power 4. That's the direction of the travel is in the slack stretch upwards. Crescent grading. The handling having the trains with 15,000 horsepower or more, speeds below 15 miles an hour, gradually reduce throttle before the locomotive crests the grade position that it will prevent speed increasing until at least one half of the train has crested the grade. Alright, your direction of train travel on a crescent grade. 0.80% motor power 1 to 2, motor power 2 to 3, 0.90% motor power 3 to motor power 4. Using the method to reduce the additional draft force created with the wave of the locomotive of the cars as they crest the grade. Rule 5.4, curve consideration. Special care must be observed in negotiating curve with excess of the 2 degrees, especially curve of 4 degrees or more, to avoid generating excessive lateral force. Since excessive force can cause the wheel to climb or rail turn over, the lateral forces can be caused. The situation comes from the dynamic forces produced by the following: run-ins of slack, having long cars coupled to short cars under certain conditions, having long light cars preceding block and heavy loaded cars, having slack running against the locomotive coupler track of the characteristic high steady with the state buff the draft forces starting. Extreme care must be taken whenever the train is started with the curved territory when the powers must be used to start the train. The minimum throttle position required in order to start the train. The advance any advanced throttle may be made in 1 notch at a time, and since the abrupt increase of the draft force of the curve may generate excessive lateral force, which can result in streamlining of the curve, the effect can be served enough to shift the track of the turn rail over, otherwise result in derailment. Negotiating. Whenever possible, the throttle dynamic with the air brake changes should not be near the beginning within the near end of any of the curve in excess of 2 degrees. Changing the power output, change the retardation of efforts in the curve should be made with a cautious and avoided undesirable forces. Slowing and stopping. Particular care must be taken with the curve of the territory because of the various combination of the curve and the dynamic air brake the terrain will always generate lateral force during the deceleration. In order to keep the train in force at acceptable level whenever the dynamic brake is in use, it is recommended that the dynamic brake be supplemented with the automatic brake application. The dynamic brake should be reduced proportionally to the degree curvature of the number of the operative axles and the locomotive, consisting of total braking effort of the dynamic brake and air brake should be kept in lowest practical level in curve territory. Heavy braking should be avoided when terrains are being slowed in curves, since the track must be absorbed forces created by braking action as well as the force of the moving of the train around the curve. Then when handling heavy, the trains at speeds below 15 miles an hour gradually reduce the throttle before the locomotive crest at the grade of the onset position that will prevent speed increasing at least one half of the train has the crest graded. This will reduce the traction effort and sufficiently compensate with the additional draft force created with the weight and locomotive head end of the cars as they grasp the grade. Do not advance the throttle until the train speed increases to reduce the throttle position. Rule 5.5. Running release of the air brakes. When the brakes are set with the light application before releasing, make the additional reduction sufficient to ensure the release throughout the train. The total brake pipe reduction should be at least 10 psi. Exemption. Graded territories where grade braking conditions prevail. Location where the brakes have to be reapplied to stop made. Do not attempt to run release if the speed is not high enough to maintain enough momentum to ensure all the brakes will release before the train comes to a stop. Or 5.6. Proper use of the dynamic brake. The effect of the dynamic brake with the train is similar with the locomotive. The independent air brake with the brake effort with the joint applied to only locomotive. The engineer must exercise the good judgment in applying the regulating the dynamic brake, particularly with the slowing order, and avoid the excessive buffet force that could result in damage of the track of the car and the trains. Care must be exercised to prevent hard slack action. Surprise stops. For short stops without using emergency slack stretch, make 6 to 8 psi automatic brake pipe reduction. Brake pipe is exhausting, gradually reducing throttle to idle. With exhaust becomes weak, and make the additional 10 psi reduction, increase the reduction in full service. If the dynamic brake is operative, then the throttle has been idle for 10 seconds. The setup of the dynamic brake gradually increases the full braking effort. 2. If the dynamic brake is not operative, all the locomotive brakes applied with the final automatic brake application at low speed apply with the sand and sufficient independent brake to complete the stop without sliding wheels. Slack bunch. When the dynamic brake is operation, gradually increase the full brake effort to make the 6 to 8 psi automatic brake pipe reduction. When the exhaust brakes are weak, and make the additional 20 psi brake reduction. Exhaust brakes will become weak, increase the reduction to full service. Chapter 6. Rules and functioning of operation of air brake locomotive equipment. Air brake and locomotive equipment.